Joining us on the program tonight is Ambassador K.C. Singh, a former diplomat. Also with us this evening, Shailja Chandra, former bureaucrat. Professor Yogendra Yadav, who is now actually sitting with the protesting students at Jantar Mantar in Delhi tonight, joins us straight from there. Also with us this evening, Sambit Patra, spokesperson of the BJP, and a UPSC aspirant, Narendra Kumar. Let me ask Professor Yogendra Yadav first. Professor Yadav, you have actually tweeted that the government decision does not address the objections about a bias in the exam for science, and there is no review or overhauling of the exam as a whole, which is why today you are sitting with aspirants at Jantar Mantar protesting against this. Now, do you believe that this is a very confused decision that the government has taken, that it's neither here nor there?
It's not there at all, Nidhi. I think there are lots of confusions about what this movement stands for, and I'm afraid some of these have slipped into your own reporting. Your report said that one of the key demands was to remove these 9 questions. No, I'm afraid this was not one of the key demands. It was one of the minor secondary demands. The real question is not about these 20 marks allotted for English. The real problem is with 80 marks allotted to what is called comprehension, where the original is in English and students are expected to display their comprehension through a translation which no one can make sense of. Unless that principle is changed, unless both Hindi, English and other languages are original, it makes no sense. That has simply not been addressed. The other big demand of the movement was that the CSAT should be reviewed. Mind you, no one said that we do not want aptitude test. They have simply said that aptitude test should genuinely be an aptitude test. It should be balanced. The weightage of the aptitude test vis-a-vis others should be correct, and internally the weightage of quantitative vis-a-vis others should be correct. All these fundamental things have remained completely unaddressed. And Nidhi, allow me to point out one more error in your report. These students who are standing here, some of them, they have never demanded a privilege for Hindi. This movement is not about Hindi. This is about Indian languages. Or as U.R. Anantamurthy, the great Kannada writer, would say, this is about bhashas, Indian languages versus English dominance. No one is against English. There is already an English qualifying exam, and this movement has never questioned it. They have all accepted it. It is about English dominance which is being questioned. It is about linguistic inequalities that are being questioned, or as I would call it, the informal system of linguistic apartheid in this country. That is what this movement seeks to question.
In fact, you wrote a very strong piece about that linguistic apartheid, as you put it this morning as well. But I want to first take the points you made to Sambit Patra of the BJP. You're hearing Professor Yogendra Yadav's criticism there, a view that is shared by many protesting aspirants today, including Nagendra, who's sitting next to you, who believe that this is not addressed their, their basic concerns, that it's a decision that is, as I said at the beginning, neither here nor there.
Nidhi, I would begin by saying that this is just the beginning of the end. This is not the end in itself, and this is a very pragmatic beginning in the sense that since 2011 the whole thing came into structure. Since 2011 people have been, the students have been ironically facing the whole brunt of the CSAT examination. There was a committee which was appointed by the outgoing UPA government to look into the pros and the cons and to give certain suggestions on this matter, and the report was only submitted day before yesterday. So a prudent government is supposed to look into the report of a democratically elected government's committee. That's what we did, and we came up with issues which were important in the sense that it was a middle path where we do not call in for litigations. Just imagine, had we scrapped the CSAT, no one would say that there would have been no litigations. There would have been umpteen number of litigations, and probably the whole examination, which is scheduled for 24th of this month, would have been stayed by some court of this country. And remember, the intention of this government can never be questioned in the sense that the DOPT department had written a letter to the UPSC demanding shifting of the date, postponing of the date also. But UPSC is a statutory body, it's an autonomous body, and that's the reason as to why UPSC had its own reason as to why it should not be postponed.
In this confusion, but in all of this, the government looks like it's caved under a section of pressure, because the panel that you were referring to, which submitted its report, said that the aptitude test is scientifically formed and should not be changed, and B, that the translation that Yogendra Yadav was also talking about, that needs to be improved drastically.
Yes.
Now, we're not seeing anything done on either front. So you appear to have panicked by the protests that have taken place and given in on a point that doesn't seem to satisfy anybody.
No, but Nidhi, certain things goes unwritten also. There is an unwritten gospel to this whole thing, in the sense that no government would say that translation should not improve. It goes unwritten that the translation should improve. It's not that you can translate a steel plant into whatever it was a lauha podha. You cannot. No sane government will allow that happening. And I assure you, well, yes, this is an unwritten part of the whole agreement, that the translation has to improve right from this year itself.
So, K.C. Singh, the point that Yogendra Yadav made, that this is not about Hindi, it is a movement against English dominance. And I think the point that he makes on the bad translation is something no one can argue over, because it is really a terrible, terrible translation over there. But is this really a movement against English dominance? Is this becoming a English versus the rest debate?
It's beginning to be framed like that, although what they are saying is different. They are saying that the comprehension test itself is not having level playing field. You see, the first 40 odd years, when our generation or earlier generation of officers were recruited, it was the initial test, your written test, was about comprehension and knowledge. Your personality was assessed in the interview. For the Foreign Service, it used to be 100 marks extra. For IPS and Central Services, it was 100 marks less. IS was somewhere in between. So it was the interview board that assessed your personality. Now, obviously, somewhere down the line, first they brought in regional languages, and then they brought in this test. When they brought it in, obviously they must have applied their mind, but it's clearly not working. But at the same time, you can't be having a popular demonstration decide the nature of the test. It's not a proper, you are selecting people who are going to be manning highly responsible positions in India. And we are giving an impression as if people selected earlier were coming in through some sleight of hand, and they were all English speakers, which is wrong. Let me give you an example that China, which has the oldest selection system, all selection systems have come from the Chinese imperial exam, which began in the 7th century, 1400, 1300 years ago. But the Chinese today, the common entrance exam to the university, which every school child in China takes and is highly competitive, has to take up Chinese, mathematics, and a foreign language, which is invariably English. So we are going away from English, whereas the Chinese are moving towards it. Why have we framed it? So you're saying that
is the mistake?
I think the mistake is that this is not an issue in India today. I've heard the Chinese foreign minister talk to Mr. Pranab Mukherjee when he is a minister on the sidelines of the UNGA, saying, you are the back office of the world, we are the back factory of the world, we want to become the back office. They realize that English is extremely important in a globalized world where things are interconnected, and the Chinese are moving in that direction while we are conducting this debate.
There are two important points you make, and I'll take those back to Yogendra Yadav in just a moment. But Shailja Chandra, there was you had actually also written a piece saying that you find that this accusation that the exam is somehow biased against Hindi-speaking people to be a non-controversy. You don't believe that that is the case, A. B, what do you think of this decision today? And C, what K.C. Singh said, that you can't have people protesting to decide how they want to take an exam and on what the criteria should be. This is not how an examination has to be conducted. Shailja Chandra.
Well, to answer your three questions, I'll take the last one first. Nowhere, absolutely nowhere, do you have examinees demanding and being able to demonstrate and come to the streets against the content and quality of the examination. This is unheard of, and it's unfortunate that it has been given so much time and importance, absolutely overriding the need for looking at the UPSC exams fundamental responsibility, which is a constitutional responsibility, which is to recruit the best available material to be able to govern this country and help politicians govern this country. Now, coming back to the whole question of English and the rest, let us be very clear that in the UPSC system, earlier, as Mr. K.C. Singh said, it was all English dominated. Over the years, there has been a huge introduction of regional languages, including Hindi. And now, if you look at the figures in the academy, I mean the probationers who are in the academy now or who have been there for the last 2-3 years, ever since 2011 CSAT was given, you will find that the proportion of rural candidates, those domiciled in rural areas, has been between 30 to 35%, and that has not changed. So that is something which really nails the whole issue. This brouhaha is being made because there is an expectation. You cannot become a doctor because you don't have the qualification. You cannot become an engineer because you don't have the basic qualification of science background. Yes, you can become a civil servant simply because it allows you a large number of subjects to choose from. I think there is a mistake there, because just because you can be a mere graduate doesn't mean that that would suffice. You have to persevere, you have to have tenacity. It's not enough that everybody in India can sit for the exam and therefore ipso facto can qualify. To come to the last point that you made, which was about the English, I think that Mr. Yadav, and I respect him enormously, but I think that he has very deftly been able to take the argument to a plane which is somewhat misleading. The question of putting in English is not because of any colonial hangover or being unfair to the bhashas, as he calls them. The fact is that I have talked to several of the IAS officers who are now probationers in the academy, backgrounds from Behrampur, Sholapur, places like that, and they said, we made up our mind when we were 15 and 16 that we wanted to join the civil service. We left our block headquarter schools, our district headquarter schools. We went and joined paying guest accommodation and hostel accommodation and just worked for these examinations. And what is the most important point, we discovered that it is much better to give the examination in English, although we are permitted to give it in the regional language. Why? Because a nuanced understanding of what is happening on the international and national field is available through the print media in English. The regional and Hindi newspapers concentrate on news. They do not concentrate on the kind of analysis that English provides. Secondly, the internet is very heavily in English, and they find that by studying English at a young age, 16, 17, 18, they mastered it and reached the academy. Do you want to do away with this kind of perseverance just to favor people who imagine that they can all get into the IAS and allied services? It's impossible, because only 0.3% of the aspirants get in every year.